I used to work overnights at a hotel and would monitor the security cameras. They would detect motion and a little indicator would blink when motion was, well, detected. Anyway, it always gave me the creeps when I'd hear the elevator ding. I'd run out to the lobby to greet the guests to make sure they didn't need something, or whatever, and nobody would get off the elevator. I'd watch the tapes and see the motion indicator blinking on a floor, then see the elevator open on that floor, then see the elevator open on the ground floor, and the motion indicator blink on the camera down the hall. It gave me the heebie-jeebies. Also, one time I was in my office in the middle of the night, and it sounded like someone banged on the door with the side of their fist. Just one single slam. You can see me reacting to it on the video. My head whips to face the door where the sound came from, then immediately whips around to stare at the camera to see who the hell was outside my door. There was nobody there, and none of the motion sensors had picked up anything. Not fun finishing the rest of that shift. I was house sitting in a huge house and set up a canary camera near my bedroom. I had an uneasy feeling someone else was in the house with me, so I set up the camera just to make sure no one came near my room. In the middle of the night, someone approached it from behind and turned it so it faced a blank wall. Then a few minutes later, turned it back the way it was before. It tripped the canary, and I got a notification on my phone. I saw it and searched the house thoroughly the next morning, and never found anything. Needless to say, I slept with my door locked the rest of my time there. I worked in a maximum security prison for a while. I was assigned to Central Control one night, which is where the camera screens were. One of the cameras was for the classifications room. I glanced at it and there was an inmate in there. This was super odd because it was 2 a.m. and nobody was supposed to be in there. Everyone that had keys to that room went home at 5. Anyways, so this inmate is just sitting in there, doing nothing. I got the sergeant's attention and told him someone was in there, and gave him the spare key to the room. He went to go check it out with a couple of other people, but by the time they got there, the room was empty. They searched for like 15 minutes, but there was definitely no one in there. We ended up going back and checking the cameras. The cameras were on a rotating loop, if that makes sense. So one rotation, there was someone sitting there. The next one, maybe 5 to 10 seconds later, he had totally vanished. It really freaked me out. I used to have an apartment pretty close to my office. The office building was kind of in a business district, but it was also kind of off on its own relative to the city's commercial district footprint. I sold the apartment, and before moving into my new home, I left my bicycle chained to the building's bike rack. It was only going to be there for a few days before I was able to move into the new place. Anyway, one day in the middle of the week, I come into the office, walk past the bike rack, and notice that it's completely empty. The building has a bunch of security cameras, and one more or less is facing the bike rack, since it's adjacent to the front entryway. I sit and watch the security tape with the IT guy. We're watching, see everyone leave the office the night before, see the bike, keep watching. Then all of a sudden, poof, bike gone. We slowed the tape down, and it seemed like when you're watching digital cable or satellite and the image gets garbled. Literally, it was bike there, then poof, gone. In the tape's timestamp, it literally happened in 1 second. I assume my bike got taken to the upside down. This happened a few years ago, before I started working at my current job. The elevators in my building go down to the first and second basement. Late one night, one of our security guards spots a group of people heading into the elevator at level 4. He thinks it's curious, because nobody is supposed to be in the building after midnight. so he keeps a close watch on all the lobby cameras to see which floor the group alight's at. The doors open at basement 2, but nobody comes out. The second guard scurries down to the elevator doors while the first guard keeps his eye on the cameras to make sure no one has left. When the second guard gets to the basement elevator, he looks puzzled and searches around. He comes back to the guard station to confirm that it's empty. Putting the building on lockdown, the 2 guards spend the rest of the night combing the building together, but they were unable to find anyone or anything. They decide to call the police, who review the footage and see the same thing. In the end, the sightings was still unexplained, but my workplace decided to stop being cheap and install security cameras in the elevators too. I used to work at a place which required to be manned 24 hours a day. Reason being is that I handled sensitive documents and files, and if somebody needed this information in the middle of the night, I would have to fetch it for them, or confirm I have it. Anyways, security is kind of tight, bars on windows, multiple locked doors to get to where I am. They would give me work to do during the night, but underestimated how quickly I could get it done. So like most nights, I finished my work in like 30 to 45 minutes and pulled out my phone to play games, watch Netflix, and browse Reddit. So now it's getting close to be the last third of my shift when all of a sudden I hear a door close. I look to the security camera and see someone walking down a hall towards my room. At first I thought it was just somebody that came in ridiculously early, so I turn around and wait for them to come in. But nobody came in, and the hairs start rising on my back. Now, this isn't a really big building, so I figure I'll find this guy wherever he is and start checking offices and storage rooms, but I came up empty-handed. However, I do see that a fire door had shut. I go to try and rewind the camera, but the digital recording is password protected, and I don't know the password. Anyways, the whole thing freaked me out. The way the person was walking down the hallway, like a determined walk, right to where I was. So, I sit with my spine tingling for the last couple of hours of my shift, and finally, people start coming in. My replacement shows up, and I tell her what I saw, and at this point, I figured I must have imagined the whole thing. I'm told to go home, and the manager and girl who replaced me would look over the camera. After getting home, I called my manager and asked what was on the camera. So they said that the video showed the fire door closing, but then the video froze for about an hour. The next thing it records is me reopening the door. I used to work part-time doing surveillance work for an art gallery. I went in horribly sick one day because I worked on a contract and I had to meet a quota for so many hours. Otherwise, I'd have to make it up elsewhere, which was borderline impossible for me because I only had free time on weekends when they were closed. So, here I am with a fever and a trash can, dripping sweat and staring at these screens, when all of a sudden, on the lower gallery, I see this black, oozing mass creeping across the floor. It just kinda slithered across the brick, up the wall, pooled into a perfect circle in the middle of the room. Then, it stood up into this weird, elongated shadow person with spindly arms and no eyes. It looked up at the camera, then very rapidly melted back into the floor, and bolted toward the hallway that led to my desk. I screamed bloody murder, then I threw up. Also, no, that thing wasn't really there. I was just way sicker than I thought. It was a fever hallucination. My boss came in and sent me home shortly after, and I actually still used that weird gangly thing my brain came up with as a motive in some of my art. I've had a couple creepy things captured on my home security camera, but only one remains unexplained. My husband was home and was getting ready to walk out. To give some background, The camera was on the kitchen counter, facing the door leading to the porch and out of the house, and another door leading to a bedroom. He made a quick stop at home, and when entering, he noticed the bedroom door slightly closed and the light was on. You can see him turn off the light and open the door more because that's where the pet's food was. As he was walking around in the kitchen, both the cat and dog are following him to get attention, and in the background, you see the light come back on in that room, and the door slowly closing itself. No windows were open, that door wasn't on a slant, and never did that before, and both pets were at his side when it happened. He didn't even notice it until later when he played the video back. When we both got home that night, we noticed the light in the room was on, and he remembered he had turned it off before. It was super creepy. I worked in a government-run psychiatric hospital, more specifically, a forensic psych hospital. That means the loony bin for people who committed some serious crimes and are being evaluated for sanity, or are in rehab. After a successful insanity plea, they don't just walk free, they go to an asylum. Although I did direct patient care, I sometimes picked up shifts to work nights and man the control center, which contained live feed of all the security cameras. For our highest risk patients, there were cameras in every room. Here's a couple things I saw. Patients having very animated, emotional conversations with unseen others in the middle of the night in the dark. I don't believe in ghosts, and I know it was just schizophrenia, but it was still kind of spooky. A guy who was in full bed restraints after assaulting another patient had flailed so violently that he flipped the bed over on himself. It was a heavy plastic bed that wasn't bolted to the floor, so we could adjust the position of it. That one sucked because some of the restraints came loose, and my coworker still had to flip the bed over and re-restrain him. He got a nice shot of Ativan after that. There was another guy painting pictures with his own feces. We didn't stop them. Everything could be cleaned, so we just let him finish, and then we put on special suits for restraining him and forcibly cleaning him. Another guy was laying down in his room on the floor. He flipped his legs over his head and started peeing into his own mouth. And probably the worst thing I saw there, suicide attempts, via smacking their head against a concrete wall. Those suck to watch. A brutal way to try and off yourself. I worked there for about a year, but I would never do it again. I did overnight security for my college while I was taking classes. Shifts ran from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. There was a hard curfew at 11:30. At that point, the doors would lock, and I was the only one for someone to gain entry into both dorms. Other than catching curfew breakers, my job was to patrol the grounds and make frequent checks of all the doors. If a door was found unlocked, it was then my duty to search the buildings for students or possible trespassers. Now it is worth mentioning that my college was nestled in the middle of an upscale residential neighborhood, an old neighborhood. That being the case, the majority of our buildings were super old mansions that were purchased back in the 40s and 50s and repurposed into classroom buildings, libraries, and offices. All kinds of creepy stuff happened all the time. Lights would turn off and on frequently in a couple of the buildings. Students who stayed late in one building in particular often reported noises and other strange phenomena. You get used to that stuff pretty quick. You rationalize the creepy away and get on with your night. But I, a skeptic and rational thinker, had a couple of instances that still bother me. For the sake of time and space, I'll tell the shortest. That one building I mentioned earlier that students complain about, it was a weird one. I had several strange experiences in and around it. One morning in particular, at around 4 a.m., I was doing a round of the campus. As I walked past the building and approached our auditorium, I felt that weird feeling that you get when someone is staring at you. I turn and look at the problem building instinctively. I see motion on the third floor at one of the windows. My eyes focus and see a person open the window and proceed to wave at me. My rational mind thought, maybe a faculty member came in early. All doors were locked, and nothing was out of place when I checked it 5 minutes before. That was the best explanation, so I wave back and continue my round. I almost finish my circuit when I come across a resident of the neighborhood who is walking their dog. He stops me with some social niceties. Then out of the blue, he mentions that he walked past the problem building and someone opened the window on the third floor and waved at him. Said it creeped him out. So I got to thinking about it. No lights were on in the entire building. All entryways were locked and in order. I immediately went to search the building, didn't hear or see anything strange. That is, except for the fact that the window this person opened and waved through was nailed shut. If that man hadn't mentioned it, I never would have given it much thought. I used to work at a jail. One night, I was working cameras, and I was just flipping through the screens, and we had a camera facing the inside of the door to the solitary hallway, and one facing the outside door. The door had a little 1-foot square window at about face level. The buzzer to open the door went off, so I checked them to see who it was that I needed to let in, and I could see a face in the window, looking through from the inside. But in the other camera, there wasn't anybody there. It gave me chills, and I never wanted to work that section again. I worked at a popular thrift store for a few years. I'd been a customer for even more years, and had always heard various stories that it was haunted. Never saw anything in person, but at one point the entire staff was all up in arms over a piece of footage caught overnight. I finally got one of the managers to show me the tape, and I must say, it was pretty damn odd. The angle the camera was pointed showed a section of the front where the jewelry case was, as there'd been a number of smash and grabs lately, and they were hoping to catch the thieves. Directly in the middle of the camera's view is an emergency door, and it's also worth noting that the entire front of the store is window glass, not solid walls. So the footage shows this emergency door bowing outward towards the sidewalk as though a giant, enormous strength was trying to yank it open. It was almost comical the way it was bowing outwards, like a bubble or something. But it was obviously violently shaking the window panes on all sides. Through the glass, there's no one there. It moves again and again, violently. Either someone was trying to get out, or something was trying to get in. I tried to rationalize it away, because working there at the time, I don't think I wanted to accept that something that strong was lurking around.